Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today we're going to do our second museum ship review. We haven't done these of American ships we've visited because many of you guys have seen them already, or they're already on your bucket list, and quite frankly, if they're easy to get to for you, you absolutely should, regardless of if I give them a good or a bad review. However, we are starting to do these now that we're traveling and seeing some foreign ships. A couple of days ago, we visited the Taiwanese museum ship, the former USS Sarsfield, a Gearing-class destroyer that's on display in Tainan. Today, we're on the Japanese battleship Mikasa in Yokosuka, Japan. Specifically with this review, I want to set expectations for what you're going to see when you come out and visit. Mikasa is much less open than, say, a contemporary ship like Olympia in Philadelphia. She's much less open than New Jersey or many other American museum ships, but there's a good reason for that. She was destroyed on multiple occasions. She suffered a magazine explosion at one point. She was rebuilt. She suffered the American Navy in 1945. They ran out of other targets to hit, so they expended some bombs on her. Then she was used as I can't remember, like a clubhouse or an officer's club or something like that during the American occupation for a while. They built a Quonset hut on the main deck and some other things, and then was rebuilt later as a museum ship. So as such, she's encased in concrete, and you can only see the superstructure, the main deck, and the deck below that, the gun deck. It seems like there's at least one stairway that leads below that might have some classroom spaces or some storage spaces or something else in there. It's unclear if that runs the full length of the hull or not. The ship is not afloat. She's encased in concrete right here by the water. And so it's unclear exactly how much of the below water hull is still intact or exists. It's real easy to see what's original as you're going around the superstructure of the ship, because you can just check for what's riveted versus what's welded. When this ship was built, exclusively riveting was used. So anything that you see that's welded is all new construction. I also encourage, as you're going around, knock on things a little bit. That'll also give you an idea of if it's new or not. Because the ship is built out of armor steel, it's often thick in places. You knock on it, it's not going to make any appreciable sound. The museum, though, has expended a lot of resources making reproductions of things that they don't have. So, for example, the broadside guns of the ship, even the main battery guns of the ship for that matter, were all removed. Originals of that type apparently couldn't be found. It doesn't surprise me that that many just weren't in existence anywhere. So they remade them all out of sheet metal. They're pretty convincing replicas. The dimensions are perfect, but you knock on them and you can tell that they're hollow, not a solid tube. For the main battery guns, you can tell that they're welded together. For the conning tower, they welded together thin pieces of steel that look like they're the right thickness, but you tap on it and it's not like hitting Battleship New Jersey's conning tower. So in many instances, the original parts just don't exist anymore because of the history of this ship after the Battle of Tsushima. Or as it's listed on this ship, although I've never seen it listed as such in American sources, the Battle of the Sea of Japan. Now, interestingly, Olympia is also missing a lot of her original parts. Her original 8-inch guns were removed and replaced with 5-inch guns when she was in service. So the 8-inch guns that are on there now are sheet metal, just like the ones here on Mikasa. Her original 5-inch 40 caliber battery was also replaced while she was still in service, and those original guns often don't exist, and so she has some original guns, or some guns that are original of the right type, but not necessarily original to that ship. She has some guns that are the wrong type, and she has some gun ports that are just empty. And honestly, I think Mikasa looks better with all of her gun ports filled in with barrels than Olympia with some that are empty. That said, Olympia still has half of her engineering plant, and it's open for guided tours. On Mikasa, it doesn't seem like any of that is left. But The museum has done the next best thing. Like most museum ships, they don't have a museum building associated with them. All of their exhibits are inside the vessel. So when you're walking around the top deck and the superstructure, you're seeing the ship restored like a traditional museum ship, where there's no real exhibits, there's some signs in places, but you're walking around like any sailor would have seen over 100 years ago. Wow, over 100 years ago. But when you go down below to what was once the gun deck, that space, while it's got the guns built into it, it's completely plated over and enclosed. The ports where the guns would have turned are welded over, so it's a completely enclosed, climate-controlled space. And it is a traditional set of museum galleries. Each of the ship's secondary battery guns are in an enclosed gun room, and so they turned each of those gun rooms into a separate exhibit space. And it makes sense. If you're used to going to Western-style museums or naval museums in general, like the way that these are set up in order, talking about first the Russo-Japanese War, or here the Japanese-Russo War, and then the Battle of Port Arthur, and then the Battle of Tsushima, and then the ship's later career, and then Admiral Tojo. Like, it is really laid out in a way that even if you can't read the signs, you'll be familiar with. On Sarsfield, every sign was written in Chinese and English. On Mikasa, that's not the case. There is still a lot of signs that are written in English, but there are some signs that aren't. And there were some times when I was walking around and being like, ooh, I wish I knew what this was. It just didn't have the sign like that. So do be prepared for that. If you speak Japanese, you're going to have a great time going through here. As far as I could tell, Japanese and English were the only languages here in the signs. English does make sense because we're right next to Yokosuka, where the major American naval base is in Japan. And we've seen a fair number of Americans walking around here. Another really cool thing about the museum spaces are there's a ton of digital technology. There are a ton of touch screens and things like that you can interact with that'll bring up CGI renderings of the ship or stuff like that. And they do have multilingual options, definitely English in Japan, and I believe there were a couple other options on some of those panels as well. Honestly, there was a remarkable amount of that digital stuff on board the ship, more than I've ever seen on any other museum ship. And it's probably a good thing because Mikasa is so large and had lost so much of her original material by the time she was turned into a museum that I'm not sure how full the museum could have looked without it. They have, in the space amidships that would have originally been for funnel uptakes and engineering and all of that sort of stuff, none of that is still left. So they've walled it off and made one large gallery space. I don't know, I'd estimate it at about 200 feet by 50 feet-ish. So really good sized space that they have some of their really important artifacts in. Things like the chrysanthemum from the bow of Mikasa, things like one of the surrender flags from one of the Russian ships at Tsushima, Admiral Tojo's uniform, like some really, really cool and important artifacts that in the United States probably wouldn't be displayed on a historic ship. They'd probably be displayed in a more traditional landside museum, a more national museum like a Smithsonian, as opposed to a regional museum like the museum ship in Camden or something like that. You know what I mean? I was absolutely blown away by the level of climate control inside the ship. Because of the importance of these artifacts, it's absolutely critical to keep them climate controlled. Ships typically don't have great climate control, and even with climate control, you still have ladders and openings for folks to access those spaces. Now, Mikasa had fantastic climate control inside, wasn't worried about the artifacts at all as I walked through, and even with, I think it was 4 open access ladders to get down there, the climate control creates such a good envelope down there that it wasn't like there was cold air blowing down the ladder. Granted, it's not the dead of winter right now or the heat of summer, But it is much cooler than we were expecting. Remember, we came on this trip expecting to spend the week in southern Taiwan in the tropics, so we weren't exactly packed with warm clothes to come up here to Japan. But absolutely comfortable when we were inside the ship. It's really cool to see ongoing work happening on this ship. On Sarsfield, we got a little bit of a behind the scenes tour and we could see that they were doing some work inside the ship, but walking around the exterior, there wasn't really evidence of that. Here on Mikasa, there is some very obvious evidence in that they've got the aft part of the superstructure scaffolded off, and you can hear needle guns and grinders running. It reminds me of being home in New Jersey. I'm getting that battleship fixed, even though I'm on the other side of the world. She faces a lot of the same preservation issues that other museum ships do. You can see pitting in the steel. Surprisingly, the original armor plate that's still here has very little corrosion on it. It's probably high in nickel, molybdenum, that sort of stuff that's kind of corrosion resistant. The sheet metal that was added on in the late 40s or 50s when the ship was rebuilt as a museum ship does have some pitting in it, although it's obviously old pitting and it's been painted over since then, so you can tell that the ship might have gone through some rough periods in the past, but it's being really well taken care of now. Obviously the work on the aft superstructure is ongoing. The ship has a traditional wood deck like you see on most other museum battleships you go on, and you can see that some areas are relatively new, some areas have a lot of patches, some areas are bald wood, and some areas they've got preservatives on it because they haven't gotten around to patching it yet. So obviously, Mikasa needs the money to keep doing the same sort of restoration work that all of our other museum ships are going through. Have you ever visited Mikasa before? Let us know in the comment section down below how you would review her, especially if you've been on Mikasa and a couple other museum ships from other countries. Be interested in hearing how you think she compares. Also, let us know what foreign museum ship you'd like us to visit next. We had you answer that question in Sarsfield a couple of days ago, and here we are on the next one. Probably will be a little bit longer before we get on the next foreign museum ship, maybe a year or so, maybe more. But we don't currently have any plans to go to another, well, we didn't have plans to go to another one when we were on Sarsfield either, but we don't currently have any plans to go on another one. So leave us some comments down below, and if they're good ideas and they're attainable, we hope to hit them soon. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, as well as from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support, and there's a link to donate in the description down below. There's also a link to Mikasa's website in the description below if you'd like to check that out and find ways to donate to their ongoing preservation work. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.